On the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle. Hope everybody out there's having themselves a great day. I swear right now the world feels like it is truly completely flipped on its side, upside down. And I don't mean like left is right, right is up is down, left. I mean like one is mountain and A is truck. Like there is no, it doesn't even make sense what's going on these days right now. It has gotten, I think, crazier and crazier. There are stories on both sides that are just I think, out of focus from reality. Not saying I'm the guy that's got it all figured out, but for sure trying my best to kind of stay rooted in some degree of semblance. Having discussions. I've got two really good friends I work with, and they don't fortunately listen to my show, thank God, but they are aware of it. And both of them are pretty much left-leaning, liberal folks. One of them is very heavily kind of listening, obviously, to what the left media is saying and very focused on that angle. And my buddy, he's kind of coming at it more from the middle. He actually asked an amazing question that came up today. There was a discussion by Alec Baldwin and Pelosi about how Trump's not actually going to leave office. And my friend brought this up today, kind of went on a little bit of a rant, which is something I might typically do. I'm all in. And he even admitted at one point, he's like, yeah, and I know this is conspiracy theory stuff, so hold on, and bam, just starts digging into a lot of those left-sided conspiracies. And one, I thought it was very cool that he called out, he was naming conspiracy theories. That's wonderful. And so that gives a little hope to me that people on the left can acknowledge the fact that some of us are all just kind of looking at information in a very interesting way and coming to conclusions that others don't necessarily agree with. Doesn't necessarily make it right or wrong, but it's common to call those conspiracies and just label people as such. And there are conspiracies that are very right-leaning. I kind of tend to come more from the deep state conspiracy side, which I think is actually less left-right. I think the left-right of politics is actually meant to divide us. I think it's one of the initial steps they created right off the bat to create a divisive political system that could work towards each other. Now, of course, they didn't advertise it as such, and that's not what the founding forefathers probably envisioned. I'm sure their idea was to keep both sides in check, right? You still want opposing viewpoints. You want to be able to have discussions, but we've gotten to a place in society where you can't have discussions. And literally, if you don't agree with what they're saying, they can yell, scream, throw tantrums. They can possibly threaten violence. There's talk of Tucker Carlson's, his house where his family lives, I guess, being called out in the New York Times. Now, the New York Times has backpedaled since, but these types of discussions are being had, and there are literally people on the left that actually think that that's okay to dox somebody and put their family at risk because of the things they discuss that these people on the radical left don't agree with. So since I don't agree with your ideology, I should be allowed to escalate to violence immediately. And certainly a concern that's happening in a lot of people these days. But that being said, Alec Baldwin's talking crazy talk. The police activity in Portland, the lack of outrage over resistance to it, tells us how Trump could stop the election in November. This is what my friend was saying, this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, Trump, I think Trump's actually going to stop the election. And it's like, bah. And my buddy, the one that's somewhat rational, is like, well, I don't understand how everybody's gotten to this point, like why we're even asking this question. He's like, of course Trump's not going to stay in office. Now, something else that was brought up in another article, and it might even be this one where Pelosi's suggesting gassing the White House if Trump doesn't leave. But the one thing she does say, and she's right, is if someone else is voted in as president and someone else becomes president, there's going to be a transfer of power to that individual. Whether or not somebody wants to stay in the White House and, start boarding up the front doors, yeah, that's not going to happen, right? So again, however this plays out, it'll happen according to how it should. Now, does Trump have some concerns about whether the election will be fair? Yes. Are there some concerns about voting and the mail-in voting, the fact that there's a number of ballots that are showing up that don't have postage stamps on it or postmark stamps, so you can't tell how old they are? There's just a lot of concerns around it. And again, as I've said before, if this process can be taken advantage of by either side or even both, I say don't do it. It's dangerous. So that's why I'm against this mail-in ballot, I just think it's a bad idea. There's way too many ways that can get messed with. I'm not cool with that. We can wear masks. We can go to grocery stores. They can spray down a thing. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done to make voting possible. And if you want to do the absentee ballot, it just requires a couple extra hurdles, but go through the hurdles and do an absentee ballot because of COVID. That's absolutely perfect. That's great, in fact. But changing how we voted for, over 200 years because of something that's questionable at best is not a good idea. And I don't agree with that. That's where I'm coming from. And again, I don't expect that you feel the same way, but Pelosi's talking crazy stuff there. Now, again, why everything feels like it's upside down, backwards, forwards, left and right. It's like, one is truck. House representatives pass a measure to ban TikTok. Wasn't Trump talking about how we got to get rid of, TikTok's bad? For once, is everybody on the same page? I mean, it must really be bad. It must be horrifically bad to the point where even politicians' personal information must be getting shared back to some place they don't want it to. Or maybe all of their messages are already on a public domain in China, probably. But it's very interesting to me that they actually agreed to that. Now, this will probably pass through the Senate, I think, because everybody's saying that this platform is messed up. But oddly, they also used it to mess up Trump's last rally, the one in Mississippi, right? They were using TikTok to buy seats or something. They were using TikTok to coordinate, they are saying. And here we are actually in agreement that TikTok is bad. Now, just be on the lookout. That probably means TikTok's already been replaced with something else. So don't get too off the mark there. So that's cool. Now, what is probably starting to push this ramp up, this need to take it to the next level right now? Because it really does seem like violence is being kicked up a notch in Portland, even though the federal troops are just trying to guard, I think, the federal building. And again, my buddy was talking about how all this violence didn't start until the federal troops were there. I don't believe that's true. I didn't have the time to go digging to try to prove it. And I literally kept my mouth shut, which I was very proud of, by the way, during his whole rant. It was my two buddies, my two left-leaning buddies were going back and forth. And I literally flipped up my microphone, went mute, right? I muted my mic, and I just listened to the two talk. And I didn't agree with a lot of what my buddy was ranting about, but I totally understand where he's coming from, and I have nothing but love and respect for this. He's one of my best friends. I love this guy. Absolutely, he's a brilliant man, too. So I don't consider this a lack of intelligence. I consider this people find information that they want to believe, that they want to believe in. And there's a group of people that really, truly believe Trump is like the Antichrist and a horrible person and all these things, and that actually do believe that government's not doing anything mischievous. They find that very hard to believe. They're like, how could you keep secrets like that? Now, I do think things like Epstein should throw some shadows onto their logic. How do you keep these people in line? How do you make sure people do what you want? How do you control people? Well, you get them doing things they shouldn't, or you catch them in bribes, or you get them on something you can bust them for. At that point, you own them. When I was a younger kid, I did something I shouldn't have at a kid's house, and it was really stupid at the time. I was a child. I think I peed in the bathtub or something dumb. That was all it was. But he would always hold it over my head that he would tell on me if I didn't do certain things. He'd want to play certain games that I didn't want to play, and he'd be like, well, I'll tell my mom that you peed in the bathtub. And it's like, all right, whatever, we'll play your stupid game. And it finally got to the point where I'm like, you know what? Tell on me. I don't care. It's not worth it. I kind of think that's where some of this is getting to at this point. Now, again, what's driving this? Mark Meadows talks about this. We've mentioned this already once before, but it's time for people to go to jail. They are obviously ratcheting up the speed at which that's going to happen. These things need to happen before the election. They need to happen before they totally shut down everything. They need to happen as we're also trying to show that the COVID virus, that it's getting better. But this threat, I think, is what is scaring the you-know-what out of the deep state players that are out there. In fact, someone was even pointing out on the media, which is weird to me because it's very deep state controlled. It was Fox, I think. And they were talking about how we really haven't heard from Brennan and we really haven't heard from some of these people lately. Wonder why? And it's interesting how they're being oddly quiet right now because their days are freaking numbered. So it's a little scary how that's playing. So again, we've got that side of it. But then we've got this huge push. Feinstein. Oh, God, I just got to love the people that politically come out of the state I live in. It just drives me insane. Breathe out the bad. Senator Dianne Feinstein is going to propose withholding funds from states who refuse to mandate masks. They want to call Trump a dictator. They want to call Trump a dictator. He's not doing this. They've even asked him outright. The Christopher Wallace interview, which I watched all 40 plus minutes of it. First off, it was tough to watch on so many levels. Second off, I don't think Trump did very well in that interview. He was sweating like a dog, too, poor guy. It must have been hot and humid as hell. But I just don't think he did that well. And then Christopher Wallace, again, is very deep state. And he's a very good deep state reporter. I mean, or investigator or whatever the hell they call him, interviewer. So again, tough to watch. I didn't like it. I didn't think Trump held up real well. Again, it's not the end of the world. I don't make up my decision on this one discussion. Most of the time, Trump does very well. But I thought that he got rattled in a few places that didn't go so well. Whatever the case is, they want to call him a dictator when he hasn't done dictator stuff. Yet, we've got people like her who want to take away funding from anybody that doesn't mandate a behavior. This is crazy, the world we're heading into. So what's interesting also is we've got cases where you've got that couple. See, yeah, I've got pictures of them here. These guys, you guys probably familiar with this picture that's viral, beyond viral. Well, they got charged. They actually got charged. Now, charged, and then that means they're going to go after them with a case. That's what happens. That's no big deal. It's going to cost them money, and I'm sure there's going to be a GoFundMe or something that'll help. But basically, the White House condemns this abuse of power after this McCloskey couple is charged with felonies. Again, it's not going to stick, but it's ridiculous. And this goes to the very heart of the Second Amendment and the fact that no one's protecting our public property. They want you to just, come on in and take all my stuff? Are you serious? That's the alternative? What kind of crazy world are we living in now? How is that okay? How is there even a question as to whether or not it was okay to do what they did? Now, does it look like they have a ginormous house? Yes. Are they probably doing well? Yes. But it doesn't give me a right to take it from them. I just have such a hard time with that. Again, twist up, turvy world where you're like, oh my God, the left's winning. Nah, I don't know. This tripped me out here. Big Red, or Red Bull. You guys probably heard of this. Gives you wings, supposedly. Yeah. Mixes well with adult beverages, too. Oh, thank you very much. Having a few of those. That's just dangerous is all that is. Like hyper with this depressant at the same time. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, Red Bull CEO fires executives who pushed for social justice, diversity, and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion training. Snowflake training, basically, for people that get triggered easily. So Stefan Kozak, I'm sure it's Stefan because you'd have to say it like that, the former North American chief executive, and Amy Taylor, the former North American president and chief marketing officer, are no longer with Red Bull after they attempted to inject liberal dogma into the workplace. Additionally, Red Bull axed or dissolved culture and entertainment teams in the UK, Austria, and Canada. Obviously, that more left-leaning, proper English type thing. We don't have, what do they have with the dogma, liberal dogma, right? It's pretty hardcore. But they actually call it something that's much more awesome. It's called dissolved culture and entertainment teams. Sounds so much more sophisticated. Anywho, they killed all that too. So yeah, UK, Austria, Canada, they don't have that stuff anymore. Interesting that this Mateschitz, fun to say, Austrian billionaire who co-funded the energy drink company in 1984 is an outspoken Donald Trump supporter. So again, he's coming out and saying, yeah, no, not so much, people. Sorry. So, all right, well, that's interesting. Now, the thing that bugs me, and I'm bringing attention to it as well, and I don't want to, but I have to, I think, at this point. The whole talk about trying to spin things into a larger war, a larger divisive war between the people. And frankly, it's moving in that direction very well right now. There is a lot of anger and animosity on the streets. Now, how far it spills, how far into the communities it spills, we'll see. How far this disillusion I mean, this not being kind to one another. Like, again, my friends, the fact that they know I don't necessarily agree with everything they say. How long can those olive branches be held out and restored? We'll see how this plays out. But there's been a bit around Portland that's they're trying to remind us of Fort Sumter. Now, I wasn't a huge history buff, still not really, but I find stuff online, it's pretty cool. But they talked about Fort Sumter. And what happened there is the federal government was asked to evacuate a particular fort, Fort Sumter, just before the outbreak of the Civil War. And certainly violence had been directed at key federal government facilities in Portland, so it feels very similar, and they're asking people to leave. But apparently what really happened in Fort Sumter is right after they tried to kick these people out, following the election of President Abraham Lincoln, South Carolina declared it was seceding from the Union and began seizing federal military facilities. While the state was able to do so with little resistance for the most part, federal troops manning Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor refused to comply. When Lincoln announced plans to resupply the fort, a Confederate artillery bombardment was directed at Sumter on April 12, 1861, and the Civil War had begun. That is all it takes. That's all it takes. And here we are, where we've got people that are threatening to burn down institutions, threatening to go into folks' homes, and defending yourself and your family and your property is not legal. Well, that starts to create a bit of an animosity, doesn't it? It starts to create thoughts of how Civil War analysis here. Black Lives Matter terror cells will carry out armed flash mob killing sprees on white communities while corporate America provides funding for illegal weapons. Survival news, they're trying to sell their thing. They're all about the scary, ooh, it's scary. But this was the second time this particular article came up in the regards to, and this is why I brought it up, is it brought up the information around these Chinese weapons that seem to be showing up in a few weird cities, and they're not 100% sure who's organizing this or why, but it is causing some concerns around how we've got weapons that are showing up, Chinese-made weapons for that matter, that are showing up in warehouses in certain cities where Antifa exists. So a little concern about what's going on there. And there's a number of call-outs here on the same concept. The reckoning is here. People are really getting ramped up around this whole idea of civil war. And there's big differences between both sides. One side's kind of a little more upset, wants to riot, get mad. But again, are they pulling in weapons? Hard to say. They might be able to arm these people. But generally speaking, the people on the other side of this that so far have been pretty chill also tend to be armed, and heavily so. And I know there's been a big push to try to get rid of the Second Amendment. That really hasn't gone well, and it's continuing to not go well. And as things escalate, I think more people are trying to buy weapons right now than you can even imagine. It is unreal how long the lines are. Not that I am saying I've seen them. I did finally get on a list. We'll see how long that takes. But that's how these things play out. So, again, I always say, peace, 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 always peace. But at the same time, I also believe, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. So I'm doing a lot of that. Now, I do have some good news that I think, to finish off this particular video, and hopefully this is something that you guys can be excited about as well. So, recent COVID data, and there's a place I get historical COVID tracking, which is where this data actually comes from. So it's covidtracking.com if you ever want to check it out. They've got great numbers. Number of tests done, number of new tests, number of positive tests, number of negative tests, number of positive and negative. They even add them together for you just in case the math's hard. We've got pending just in case we're not all done. So I think that's where the difference is between these totals, right? We've got current hospitalizations, got total number of deaths, and we've got total tests. And they even go so far as to break this apart by state. So again, covidtracking.com. It's a great site. Love it. So that's where this data from this LifeSite article has come from. And they point out some very, very cool things. We'll see if I can zoom in a little bit and make this better. But one of the big numbers I want to point out here is how the media are engaged in highly intentional and fraudulent game of selective data reporting to incite panic for political gain. If you watch the mainstream press, pundits, academics breathlessly recite the rapid, increasingly COVID-positive tests And they show graphics that display a hockey key stick update of doom, right? This horrible, looks like the weather that, the end of the world was going to come from man-made global warming in 2 seconds, and then the hockey stick thing they always talk about. So this is what we're used to seeing, this is what's going on because Trump had a rally. So if that doesn't sufficiently scare you back into the place of shelter, they take the fear up a notch by showing the increase in hospitalizations with COVID graphs. So you've got this one oh my God, Trump talked about getting light inside of you, and ever since that moment, even though it was way after that, I'm just being exaggerative, hyperbolic. But again, we've got this sharp spike, and that's really all they show you. Well, what these guys kind of do cool about is just a small amount of research shows the opposite picture. COVID is in retreat. Look at what happens when you include the volume of testing data with the number of positives we are finding. So this first graph, if you see up here, these orange numbers, it's the number of tests. Number of tests is growing very quickly. A lot of tests are happening. Down over here, this is the number of people that are getting it. Yeah, there's an increase. Look at how many freaking tests we're doing. Yeah, there's a small increase down here. Just looking at the numbers. These are the numbers. So the number of tests versus the number of actual positive cases. New tests, 754,858. Of those, well, this is our total positive number, sorry. So of all the tests that have happened so far, total tests over here, 47 million. Of the 47 million, 3 million are positive, 43 million are negative. So when you compare the numbers, you get a different idea. So that is not all of the good news, though. No, there's actually some more good news. The most important question of any pandemic are how many people are being harmed or killed by the disease. That data on that front are even more exciting. This is the graph that shows the daily volume of hospitalizations, ICU patients, and ventilators used by COVID. So as you can see, I think hospitals are in blue, right? So we've definitely got a lot of hospital stuff going on, sure. And then you've got your ICU stuff up here, kind of spiked way back in, this is, April 15th, right? So it spikes and it's gone down, and now, okay, it's just a little bit going up, okay. But yeah, there's people in ICU right now. And this gray data represents ventilators. So of course we had the initial spike, then we had another spike, and then that's just progressively going down, and it looks like maybe flattening, but it's certainly not going up. Now, one of the things they talk about here, and this is a really good thing to keep in mind, they opened hospitals back up for elective surgeries, for other things. And so, yes, hospitalizations went way up as people started to go back to hospitals to get things done. And yes, some people have actually had some ICU and having to take it to another level because they're critically injured or need critical care. But how do you reconcile the decreasing usage of ventilators and ICU beds with the increase in hospitalizations? The reason is that the hospitals, after spending months nearly empty in anticipation of the COVID flood that never happened, have reopened to business as usual. Everyone who comes for elective procedures, trauma, or anything else is tested and incidentally found to have COVID. So, of all the people doing elective surgeries, while you're here, let's go ahead and do a quick test on you, and we'll enhance our numbers. Again, partially why Washington said, hey, hospital states, we need you guys to give us your numbers also. Not just taking them from the states anymore. They said, no, we want to see them ourselves. So all that is happening as well. So here we got daily new hospitalizations and deaths. So new daily deaths was spiked. This is May right here, right? These two spikes right here, late April, basically April 29th. And then right here is looks like May 13th. And then sharp decline. And no spikes, by the way. Have you noticed that? No spikes. Now, it's flattening a little bit, or upsy-downsy flatten, but the general peak to peak to peak, if you draw a line from that, it seems to be flattening a little bit. So the COVID daily mortality graph shows an incredible success. It actually shows with real numbers and facts those things the people on the left seem to hate. At least the deep state people hate it. But people on the left seem to, too. It's kind of unfortunate. So I wanted you to keep these things in mind. Again, if you want to check out your own numbers, go to covidtracking.com. It's not a site I own. I have nothing to do with this site. I found it early on in the COVID cycle, and it breaks it down by state. If you go up here, I don't even remember how to do it. Our data, there it is, data by state. So if you click on that real quick, just to give you guys a little taste. And then you can scroll down and literally, so it shows the overall number as of today. Shows some cool graphs in here. I didn't even see these before. These are new. These are super cool. Look at that. So it did drop the death graph in, current hospitalizations, right? When you look at these things outside of the relative data, like they're talking about, it changes everything. But anyway, so it got broken down by states, shows how many cases the state has, how many new, how many total tests they've done, how those break down. It's got everything broken down. It's a great site if you're curious how the data is playing out. But again, crazy, flipped upside down, topsy-turvy world where anything's possible, where things are definitely trying to escalate, where I'm asking and begging people to at least consider the health and well-being of everyone else before we do crazy radical stuff. To try to understand this is what they're trying to do is instigate. And if we take that power away, if we take their ability to do that away, then we can have a lot of success in controlling how this plays out and how this escalates. Like if we can be the bigger people. And then on top of that, people are going to end up getting arrested for stuff that happened against this spy scandal, which is, again, going to enhance things, but the divide is probably going to get worse and worse. But I'll tell you, more and more people are going to start jumping from the one side onto the other, just no matter what, because the other side is ridiculously crazy and is sliding down a very quick slope right now into a very bad place. And while the other side may have a guy that is questionable and may piss some people off, he seems to actually care about the American people. And if you spend enough time listening to anything that Donald Trump actually says, you tend to find that he does seem to care about people. This is one of the big changes that's happening right now. And a lot of people are being given an opportunity to choose one way or the other, and certainly being given an opportunity to change their minds. And really, with all the things that are going on with Ray and Q saying one thing one minute and changing his mind the next, and all this other stuff that's going on, and trust this person, don't trust this person, seriously, there's a lot of crazy going on right now. And I think for most of us, we're starting to realize that a lot of the Q communications are really tied into freaking other people out, causing discussions, and generally speaking, causing certain people to panic. And I think there's a lot going on. This is without a doubt military intelligence. Without a doubt. There's more people than just Trump behind this whole movement. And that's one thing I'd like a lot of people to remember. Trump is a great guy. He's brilliant, high IQ. He definitely is gruff. He's definitely a New Yorker. He definitely upsets people from time to time. But I'll tell you what, there's more behind him, and these are patriots. These are people that love the Constitution and love you and I, the American citizens of this great country. I appreciate each and every one of you. Where we go one, we go all. It's on the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle.